CA Agile Requirements Designer, Populate CA SV RR request response pairs. This is a how-to guide on using ARD to quickly generate RR pairs and how you can populate them into CA SV, CA Service Virtualization. So the agenda, we're going to have a look at some existing traffic. We've got a little weather app, and out of that we're going to create an automation template in ARD, which doesn't take very long. We're then going to do a bit of modeling of some interesting traffic we'd like to create. Then we're going to actually generate some traffic, and once we've generated it, we are going to populate CA Service Virtualization with the generated request response pairs and have a look at them in live mode and virtual mode. And then at the end, we're going to look at the Javelin flows, which actually populate the service virtualization in some detail. So first things first, let's take a look at the service we're going to be virtualizing. So there is a little openweathermap.org URL out there, and in effect what we've got a little app here which kind of shows you, if we switch to Boston and click lookup, then we are sending a request through like so. Then we're getting a response. This one's been formatted, and then you've got the raw response sitting at the bottom like so. And as you click on each one and do a lookup, that's actually putting some traffic through like so. So what we're interested in doing is actually simulating. In this case, what we're going to do is we're going to simulate a hurricane coming through New York City. So the idea is we're actually going to generate the request response pairs for a bunch of towns and cities close by to New York. I think I've given a range of 500 miles just to see what the weather would be like dependent on the severity of the specific hurricane that's passing through. So first things first, let's go into Agile Designer. So let's have a look at the flow that I've created. Now, in a nutshell, what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to pull in a bunch of cities, and in this case I'm going to pull them in from a database, and I'll show you that in a moment. We're going to read through the various cities. Now this is the logic that we've got, which is going to set a bunch of variables and parameters associated with the hurricane severity, speed, wind speed, temperatures, etc., which is the calculate, and then the bottom bit is the automation, where we're actually going to spit out the SVRR pairs. So let's just quickly have a look at the top, and all we've really done is we've just created a very simple table, and that contains a bunch of cities, and what we've got is the lats and longs, and then we have the distance in kilometers, in fact, from New York City, which we've calculated. So that's sitting in a little table, and then if we go back into Agile Designer, what we've got in there is we've created, if we go to test data, you can see we're just using one of the data painter functions, which is just going to pull in, selecting the city from the lat long, and we're just literally going to pull in the city, the longitude, the latitude, and the distance. So that's our starting point. And then as we move through our various different pieces of logic, once we've done that, we then do some calculations. And those calculations, again, are basically, so if we look on there, you'll see, are to do with the distance, and we're using an arc cosine, etc. And this is just a little bit of mathematics sitting there in between us. And then at the end, we are then going to go into the automation itself. Now, before we go into the automation, what we're just going to have a quick look at, if you look inside SV itself, they have this idea of request responses. So we've got a specific request like so, and then if you look at the response data, you'll see we've got the kind of core response information sitting like that. In this case, this is a sort of REST JSON call, and what we need to do is to populate those requests and responses. So how do we do that? What we need to do is we need to create a little configuration automation script, and this is going to be standard for virtually all ARD SV integration. So, and you can create various layers. In this case, we've got a request, we've got a response, and then we've got a run command. So let's look at the request first, and what we pretty much have in here is we just have a little variable which is the city name, and that's going to create us a file with the name of the, in this case, the test case, the city name, and request text. The way that SV works is that it needs you to create an individual request and response file, which we're then going to zip up and push into the SV engine. So we're going to substitute the cities like so. And then if we look at the response, now the response is a little more complex. This is kind of standard stuff getting in posting, and then you can see the main stuff that we've gone through here is the coordinates, the longitude, and you can see we've parameterized them up, longitude and latitude. Doesn't take very long, and all I really did was just cut and pasted the request response in here, and then I went through the variables that were interesting in adjusting, the temperature and the pressure and so forth, and the rest of them I just left alone. And then finally there's a pretty standard one, which is a command one, and what this is going to do, this is going to make a call out to our Javelin engine, and the Javelin engine is actually going to do the hard yards of actually pushing the data up into the SV engine. So now that's our automation, that's our calculations in the middle, and that's our test data management. In this case, we are populating quite a lot of request response pairs. You may well be more interested in just generating the specific request response pairs associated with a test case that you're dealing with. So you might have 20 or 30 test cases, and then you would generate 20 or 30 specific request response pairs to satisfy the test cases that you're dealing with. But in this case, we're more interested in simulating a hurricane in New York City. So now let's just go to our path modeling. Now what I've done is I haven't gone through all the potential scenarios, and there are a lot of them. Let's just have a look at all possible. There are 40 different scenarios. I've actually just picked one, which is we pull out of the climate accord. We've waited 20 years, and we've got a category 5 hurricane coming through New York. So we've now got just one path, and what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go to our automation, and all you have to do is click on export. Now I need to now tell it where I'm going to put my RR pairs, so that will pop up in a second. And here you can see we've got our 3 layers. These are standard, the run command, which is always the same. Then we've got our requests, and you can see that we've actually, for all the tables, all the rows in the table, we've created a separate request. And for each response, you can see this is a mixture of the name of the city, and then we've done the calculations, which have now been substituted into here, like so. And in this case, I'm just going to pop them out into this particular folder, which is called Weather SVRR. And if I click on export, I have now exported those files. So let's go and have a look at them. Now this is the folder we put them into, and you'll see there's actually 3 files. So in this case, what I've done, instead of actually creating individual request responses for each city, I've actually lumped them into individual single files here. So if you open up this one here and just open that with Notepad++, you'll see here that we've actually used a little trick. We've just put the name of the file we want to create, and if you then go back to the response, you'll see a similar one here, and what we've done is we just said that's the file name I'd like. So I've just kind of lumped them into one file for ease of use, and then we've also created a little command script, and this is, as I said, pretty standard, and all that's going to do is going to accept one parameter, and that parameter is actually just going to put it into the port number. We care about the particular port that we're interested in creating. So let's just nip over to SV and find a port. Right, so having a look at SV, you can see here, I've obviously been playing with this a little bit before, so I'm going to pick a port 15237. Now let's just go into a command prompt. Now we've actually created a little command prompt to run here, and if I just run it, it's going to prompt me and says actually I need to give it a port number, so I'm going to give it 15237. And let's just watch this run for a second. So what it's going to do, it's actually the way that SV works is it needs to create a little subfolder, which we're going to call Armageddon. Then it's then going to zip it up. So if we just pop over to the RR, you'll see now it's created an Armageddon.zip. If you pop in there, you'll also see it's created a little properties file. So if we look at that properties file, that's just telling us the name of the service or the BSI, and then we can also have the listening port like so. And if we come back here, what it's actually doing now at the moment is actually posting this up into the SV engine. So we'll just leave that for a second. And it gives you a little message. And then if we go over to SV itself and look at the portal again, You'll see here that we've got Armageddon has come in. It's come in with 15237. At the moment there are no transactions against it, and what we're going to do now is we're actually going to have a look at that in the app that we looked at before. Okay, so let's have a look at the app. So if we go and look at New York now, let's have a look at the live one. Look up. It's currently 24 degrees, 5 miles an hour, a little bit of rain. And now we're going to switch to the virtual one, SV port 15237, and we click on look up, and we can see we've got 176 miles an hour. And then maybe we want to switch to something like Boston, see the effect there. Still 178. Let's look at something like Staten Island. Like so, and have a look, see what's going on there. And you can see a 233 mile an hour wind. It's quite hot, 99% rain, like so. So that's all running through our virtual services that we've generated and we've pushed out into the Armageddon running on port 15237. So now what we're going to do is look under the covers at the Javelin flow that's actually done the majority of the work. So if you remember before, I actually just ran a little command script which had one parameter, which was the port. Now that command script basically is calling Javelin in a batch mode. So if we just take a quick look at it, you'll see here that we're actually generating a little thing called runjav.xml and runjav.csv. The CSV is the parameters, and this is telling us where we need to be running Javelin from and what we're actually running. So if we just take a look at the files that have been created, and those just automatically are created by the let's just open that with Notepad++. This is created by the command script, and this is just telling us the port ID that we need, which is in a variable called var port. And then if we just go back and have a look at the XML, as I mentioned before, that's pretty straightforward. It's just telling us some of the files, and it's also telling us that this is the CSV that's going to drive it. And this is the actual Javelin flow that we're interested in running, which is a thing called post SV. So let's go and have a look at that. Now if you pop in there, now there are a few extensions you'll need for this, so just contact us and we'll give them to you. But in effect, all we're doing is we're creating a little subfolder, just saying a little log message, and this top half is standard Javelin, and all I'm really doing is just splitting up the split files into individual files. They then are moving them into the subfolder, so you end up with this subfolder like so. Now it gets interesting, and what you'll see in Javelin, we've now actually come in and we've created a new property, which is sitting over, let's just have a look at that property. Let's go into the properties like so. And you can see here that we can set parameters that are then going to end up in that XML file, and in effect, here's the parameter. So that's where we're going to put it into the services property.xml, into the same folder, and we're actually setting the port, and we're actually setting it using the variable var port, which has now been passed through by the command prompt. Now what you'll also notice is there is a palette box, a palette item now called CASV, and you'll see there CASV set property, which is pretty much what we did with that one there. And the service name var file name is just coming in this case it's set to Armageddon. Then we do a little zip. So once we've actually created that XML file, we need to zip it up. And then what we need to do then is do this upload file, which is again a property on the Javelin palette, upload file to SV. Here you can see I've actually hard coded this because we're assuming SV is not going to move around too much. I'm telling it the zip file I'm interested in, and everything else has been pretty much handled by that XML file in terms of the characteristics of the service that we're going to create. So this is a very standard Javelin flow. You don't really need to do much, just get hold of this flow, and what you'll also need then is just if you go back in and take a look at the configuration, you just need to make sure that when you in one of your layers, the request responses are kind of up to you, but then you just need to make sure that you have this command script created, because this is going to make your life easier, because all you have to do is invoke that command script, and in this case with one port. You could, if you wanted to make it a bit more sophisticated, add in any other SV parameters that you like. Thank you very much. So if you're interested in having a look at the actual files that we've just used in the demo, get in touch with the AOD team and we'll send them out to you. And it shouldn't take you very long before you're generating lots and lots of interesting RR pairs. In this case I've done a mass mode, but you're more likely to be more interested in creating specific RR pairs using the automation capability inside ARD, and then obviously you can then link it with the test case design so that the appropriate virtual request and response get generated at the same time as the test case.